Hello, good evening and welcome ladies and gentlemen to another exciting round of intense racing action in the middle of the pack. Racing League Fall Into PCUP Championship for 2025 has brought to you on the Premier Sim Racing platform available only on PC, known as iRacing. On today's agenda is round 7 of 8, our penultimate round of the season, and we have remained in Japan to complete our Japanese doubleheader, and with all our sprint races for the season, what was once known as the Twin Ring Motegi, in reference to the fact there are two circuits combined together here in the Tochigi Prefecture of Japan, but now known today as the Mobility Resort Motegi. But either way, depending on how you prefer to name it, is a circuit that originated in 1997 as built by the Honda Motor Company. Originally envisaged as a location where the company would be able to further its motorsporting ambitions, particularly when it came to oval racing and IndyCar, where it very quickly emerged into being an absolute classic circuit for what would be racing not just on a domestic and national level, but also around the globe. And particularly locking in on its Grand Prix circuit, which our drivers will be taking on today, its 14-corner layout is rather unique in presenting a stop-start nature of racing, with many of its corners being low-speed apex, predominantly hairpins, which are followed up and connected together by extended straights. It's really going to feel as though it's a sprint from corner to corner, and there's always the prospect of diving up the inside to look for an overtaking opportunity. But where are my manners? Allow me to welcome you all to this post-round broadcast live from circuit side for your viewing pleasure. Indeed, you're tuning in right now on YouTube, all 30 Twitch. On YouTube, you can be tuning in via what is TX11TX, all 30 Paul Walsh, and welcome to you guys and girls tuning in on YouTube, or you could be tuning in via Twitch at twitch.tv/TX11, and welcome to you guys and girls tuning in via Twitch. Now, regardless of what media platform you're tuning in on, the broadcast will be exactly the same. And in the commentary, if you have myself, my name is Paul Walsh, also known as TX11, or Britain a Spit, depending on what media you follow me on. And I will bring you all your racing action as it unfolds in this post-round broadcast. But what does that mean for the uninitiated? Well, the racing you are seeing is not live, but this broadcast is. Therefore, we are taking a look back at all the racing action which occurred back on Wednesday, the 19th of November, 2025. But we're bringing it to you as if it were live this Saturday, the 22nd of November. We do not know the results or what happens over the entire race day, whether it be the practice session that's currently coming towards its end, or to the upcoming qualifying session, nor the race session itself. And therefore it's as close as possible to the raw live viewing experience for us here in the commentary booth, and we aim to make sure it's as close as possible to the raw live viewing experience for you guys and girls tuning in at home. And as always, we do ask no spoilers please in our respective stream chats. In terms of our schedule for today, times in Greenwich Mean Time, that's GMT, or Universal Coordinate Time, UTC, as we can see in approximately what will be 5.5 minutes time, we're going into our final qualifying session of the season, 10 minutes in duration as always, with all drivers having plenty of opportunities to try and put themselves on pole, after which we will then be making our way to the grid at 5:20 in order to see who is going to be able to do the dance to victory over 35 minutes of absolutely fast and frantic racing. But as we come into this round, let's recap the story then after 6 rounds in the championship, and well, where do things stand, with things looking to be on the precipice of conclusion as of next round. As we can see, firstly, today we're at the Motegi circuit, completing our Japanese doubleheader, and with it, round number 3 of the Middle of the Pack Cup, but round number 7 of the overall championship. In a week's time, we make our way to Australia, staying in the Asia-Pacific region, but we'll be heading all the way down to Oceania for the Phillip Island Grand Prix circuit, and on the 26th of November, it'll be the second of our 2 feature rounds on the calendar. No qualifying session there, they'll be lined up in reverse championship order, and we will be seeing how all the drivers get on at a circuit where it's going to be the best part of 50 minutes of racing there. Indeed, a very tricky circuit to get right with all its sweeping bends. But before that, of course, we do need to complete our final sprint race round. And prior to this, of course, we started off in Japan with round number 6 at the Okayama International Racing Circuit. And goodness me, what a round it was across our 2 classes. Particularly in Pro, where we got to see David Adeyemi take his first win of the season in an incredibly close finish between himself, Matt Best, and Jaden Callaway, where in the end it was just as much pressure from the ITD West teammate of Adeyemi, of Jaden Callaway, as it was from the Texas Speed Sim Racing driver of Matt Best, your championship leader coming into this round, as we'll talk about a little bit more shortly. But let's not forget as well, in the early stage of the race, we also got to see James Logsdon put on a rather impressive performance, but unfortunately a major lock-up into turn number 1 saw his well-being, and indeed his race, all come undone. But meanwhile in the AM class, it was a lot more straightforward. It wasn't as close fighting on the slippery circuit, and we got to see Shahi Zahair lead the way after missing out on pole position by a quarter of a second to Mark Senegal, but a quick mistake for Mark Senegal completely completely inverted things, and as a result, Zaher was just able to pull away with some initial pressure from Blake Phillips and not upsetting him whatsoever, and therefore is absolutely faultless in the rather damp conditions. But of course, it could all change today because we are expecting dry conditions here in Japan, and as we come into talking about the championships, well, let's regale you with how the points stand, starting with the overall Drivers' Championships. And as we can see in the Pro class, it is Matt Best who leads and could wrap things up prematurely today with a round to spare. All he needs to do is score a few points, and he needs his rivals not to score as well. Indeed, it's looking as though he's definitely the favourite right now, and all he needs effectively is a 5th place finish in the Pro class to guarantee things, albeit he does need to keep in mind it would be overall finishing position points that are going to matter the most, but he just needs to get to the finish line really, and that's where he's got it all wrapped up. Meanwhile, the bigger question is who is going to finish second? Tom Bryce has finally leapt ahead of Jason Landry by 4 points, with Landry of course not on the grid for the remainder of the season, having departed us as of the conclusion of round number 4 due to personal circumstances, but always won the Canadians' court, I can tell you that, but he's just not quite able to make the racing anymore. But Tom Bryce leading the way, Jalen Callaway is quickly catching up behind, now on 153 points, 2 ahead of Daniel McConnell, and then it's a further 12 points to David Adeyee, last round's overall winner. Julian Jones sits 12 points behind him. Then we do have James Logston, Edwin Offred and Justin Braggon completing your Pro Overall Drivers' Championship standings. In the AM class, it's not as straightforward at the very top. Shahi Zaher is the leader, yes, but he is not expected to wrap things up today. Even if he takes victory, he would need all of his rivals to retire. And leading that train of rivals, firstly, is Blake Phillips on 197 points. Indeed, the gap is vast. It does stand at 16 points, but right now, should Phillips be able to score a win and Zaher, meanwhile, drops the ball, we could see things on a level playing field or thereabouts going into our finale. But Mark Senegal is only a point behind. And that leads to an interesting conundrum for Phillips. Does he focus on chasing down Zaher, or does he have to focus more on fighting for second? Well, he's the one who's got to decide there whether he wants to be run-up or champion, as Mark Senegal, meanwhile, just wants to be the thorn in everybody's side who continues to chase down the top 2. He's 14 points ahead of both Glenn Bratton and Jermaine Warren, with them on even scores now. Glenn Bratton only ahead based on result countback, and it's Billman DaCosta in 6th place, 33 points ahead of Nick Bader, with Aaron Lahr, Joshua Dillon and Antti Piper completing your top 10, and Carl Peterson, who returned to the grid and made his debut for this season last time out. Great to see him back again. He's in 11th best of the rest and last of them all on 36 points, equal to Piper, and looking to move ahead come the end of today. As for the Cup Championship standings, because of course the final 4 rounds of the season forming one of our 2 cups here, and that is none other than the Middle of the Pack Cup, and as we can see with the scores from rounds 5 and 6, in the Pro class, Matt Best is starting to extract an advantage of 23 points over Daniel McConnell, his teammate, with being a further 2 to Tom Bryce, and David Adeyee, Jalen Callaway and Julian Jones all need to catch up quickly if they want to have a chance of trying to take the Cup crown at the end of the season. Meanwhile, in the AM class, well, much like in the overall AM Championship, it's not as clear-cut at the very top, where 7 point advantage for Shahi Zaher over Mark Senegal, but Jermaine Warren is only 5 points behind and Glenn Bratton a further 3. Blake Phillips, having missed a round, he sits on 40 in 5th place, and therefore it's really starting to emerge as a battle between the top 4, but never say never, of course, because a retirement for any one of those drivers could very quickly see them relinquished down towards the bottom of the order. But behind Phillips by only 2 points is Joshua Dillon, who in turn is 2 ahead of both Anthony Piper and Carl Peterson, and Billman DaCosta brings up the rear in the standings there in 9th place. That's the standings. Let's now talk about our host circuit for today. And our host circuit, of course, is none other than the Grand Prix layout on the Mobility Resort Motegi. Located near the city of Motegi in the Tochigi Prefecture of Japan, it is the home of the Honda Motorsport Museum, and indeed in commemoration of all the achievements of the Honda manufacturing company over its extensive history, and a huge thank you to iRacing.com for not just their brilliant simulator, but also capturing and bringing to life this wonderful circuit and argue one of the lesser known circuits in the world. At its core, of course, a 14-corner layout that is absolutely packed with low-speed apexes, indeed, and long straights that go with it. And around here, the aim of the game is going to be the very best on the brakes, which is an absolutely brilliant test of ability of the Porsche 992 GT3 Cup car, because the one thing that these cars do not have is anti-lock braking systems or ABS, nor do they have traction control systems or TCS, and hairpins and low-speed apexes are the very worst after a long straight to be able to test your braking and accelerational abilities. But as the drivers make their way around here, they'll find the opening 5 5 corners will feel very similar as they roar the way through the double apex hairpin at turns 1 and 2, and the same at turns 3 and 4, albeit not symmetrical there at the latter 2 corners, and it is very much a late apex at turn number 3 and trying to get as flat out as quickly as possible on the exit at turn 4. At turn number 5, we see the circuit change complexion slightly, beginning to open up into some sweeping bends at turns 6, 7 and 8, with the S's sequence there then giving away to another hairpin corner at turn number 9. It's then followed up very quickly by another hairpin at turn number 10 on the east end of the circuit before they make the way down the east start-finish straight and all the way down towards turn number 11 they'll brake. In the downhill braking zone, that camber change can catch a driver out because it's downhill braking to highly camber at the apex, but they get it right. They'll go underneath the oval bridge and through the left hand of the turns 12 and 13 they'll go before braking sharply into 14 and completing a lap before starting it all over again or finally seeing that checker flag. Now, as for our race rules, because we can't go racing without them, in terms of setup, drivers are running a fixed setup as provided by the Middle of the Pack Racing League. Fuel loads will be restricted to 40%. A closed qualifying format, which has just begun, it shall be used lasting 10 minutes in qualifying. And as for our sprint race, well, the race shall start by a standing start, as is the tradition of all Porsche Cup racing, typically around the world, with each driver having one fast repair available, and a driver shall receive a drive-through penalty if they accumulate 15 or more instant points. But that's enough rules, regulation, everything in between. We're all here for the racing, so let's make our way back to circuit side as those qualifying times are already started to thunder together, albeit all the drivers on their initial out laps at the moment, and well, very soon they will be starting to make their way onto their first flying laps, of which they do get several. But as we do see Jaden Callaway inching his way on through, it was a bit unfortunate not to take victory versus David Addy last time out at Okayama, but in the end it was very interesting to see how Callaway tried to stay with his teammate all the way through the race and use that as a catapult to then try to make a move for the win right at the very end. However, Addy was absolutely clocked onto it, and he's here today as well for ITT West, so we'll see them back together once again, looking to give each other an equal measure, but of course they'll be up against the man who wants to wrap up the crown a round early. Here he is, he's Matt Best in the number 11. And the Texas Speed Sim racing driver, as we mentioned earlier, all he really needs to do today is finish the race in the points, and he will arguably wrap things up with a round to spare, and I think he'll feel very happy with that to take the crown, as he does take a little bit of grass with him there, coming out to turn number 4. But that's the story in Pro. Let's talk a little bit about our AMS as well, and we'll Shahi Zahir, of course, the championship leader. If he can add another win to his textbook today, he'll be feeling as though he's gradually guiding himself to a championship crown. However, he does have the ever-present challenge from both Mark Senegal and Blake Phillips. And well, Blake Phillips is the one we always keep an eye on first and foremost because he's the only other AM driver to take a win out of 6 rounds this season. He has 1 to Zahir's 5, but given his consistency in finishing so close behind Zahir each and every time, that's why the gap has not opened up as much as it could in terms of the number of wins and the number of points versus each other. It sounds as though it's a little bit of a contradiction, but I assure you that's one of the most wonderful things about the Middle of the Pack Racing League, in the fact that because points are scored on overall finishing position, albeit the AMs do get bonus points for first, second and third, which is 3 points for first, 2 for second and 1 for third. That added to, say, the overall win point of 50, and it goes down in divisions of 2. So second is 48, third is 46, etc. It does mean it keeps the championship very much alive across all the classes all the way to the end of the season. Because if you have a bad round in either of your classes or overall, what you very quickly find is you can either score some huge points suddenly, or you can lose a huge number of points very quickly, particularly if a driver in your class suddenly outperforms several of their higher class peers, which we've not been strangers to that this season, I can tell you, with Blake Phillips absolutely demonstrating it with his one-way sprint, and therefore that leads to absolute madness when it comes to sometimes how the points do go, but that's what keeps things absolutely fresh season to season. But as those first laps are starting to come onto the board, here is Matt Best, who set the initial provisional pole time at a 54.162, but we suspect that the times are going to get a bit quicker over the course of this session, albeit they haven't got long, and it is quite a long lap around here, a lot longer than one would expect perhaps, given the fact that they do race GT3 class machines around here year in, year out. You also will see the likes of Super GT cars race around here, but these Porsche Cup cars are a little bit slow around this circuit because of their absence of anti-lock braking systems and traction control. It means whereas the Super GT and also GT3 class cars by comparison are able to really abuse their brakes and their throttle pedals on corner entry and exit respectively, these cars you have to be a lot more sensitive, and that's what extends the lap time around here. You don't have quite as high an average lap speed by comparison, albeit they're still going around here very quickly, I can assure you, much faster than, let's say, a MX-5 Cup car. As meanwhile, David Ade, he heads towards the timeline. He's not been purple in any of the sectors so far, but what is he able to do for his first lap? It's a 54.490, puts him 3 tenths off of Matt Best's overall time, puts him second on the overall pecking order. So good job there from David Ade. And where are my manners? Because we haven't introduced this man on the grid today. Newcomer to the grid, but he's no newcomer to the middle of the pack racing league community. It's Jason Lynn, the very established sim racing photographer, and we're very happy to see him out there representing the glass and steel photography and design team today. And as he makes his way on around through turn number 9, we're very eager to see how he gets on in the AM class here, and right now he's looking to be one of the quickest AM drivers out there, but keep in mind there's been no valid lap so far from Blake Phillips or Jermaine Warren, so we're yet to see the true potential of the entire AM field. But showing his potential, Jaden Callaway tops the time, and then suddenly Matt Best leaps back ahead, but only by a tenth if that, as James Logston now gets a valid lap on the board, a 54.138. They're all starting to come in quite quickly now, and as they do, well, we need an on-board lap for one of our drivers, and we're going to get it from none other than Julian Jones as he takes us around for a flying lap of the Twin Ring Motegi, now Mobility Resort Motegi Grand Prix circuit. So making his way down towards turn number 1, or up towards it by the highest points of the circuit, as he goes onto the brakes there nice and early, tiptoeing the car in, V-shape in the apexes there as he intentionally goes deep, drops gear from third to second to rotate the car, and now back on the throttle as he heads up towards turn number 3. That's the first hairpin. Here comes another one, and as he gets set this time, he'll look to his right hand side for his brake marker, looking for the brake boards and the cones. Hard on the anchors he goes, down to second gear. Now wait for it, gradually feed the throttle in, but unlock the steering wheel with it, as otherwise the car's going to go entirely round, and Jones does a brilliant job there as he now makes his way down towards turn 5. It's another long stretch where he gets ready to go onto the brakes, but slightly downhill under braking it. Use all the entry curb on the left hand side and down to second gear. Abuse the apex curb to push the car through the corner. Now under the bridge he goes and in towards turn 6. Through the right-hander, it's going to be absolutely flat out, while the few times you're flat out for a corner here at Motegi. And now onto the brakes, you'll go into the SSC into turns 7 and 8. Dropping down to third gear and straight lines off the apex there, and immediately onto the curb at turn number 8. You'll see there drops the gear in mid-apex, and as a result helps him rotate the car as he now makes his way in towards another hairpin at turn number 9. Here it's about patience again. Wait for that late apex, hit second gear, and with it get the power back on. Now over to the left hand side to set up for turn number 10. Looks at his braking boards there, the 100 metre board being his real marker, braking at about 90 metres apex, and as he roars his way down to second gear, well, now make his way back up through the gearbox once more, heading all the way down the east start finish straight. And right now Jones putting together a very smooth lap, and smooth is normally fast in these Porsche Cup cars, as he gets ready to brake downhill here in towards turn number 11, nice and early at the 150 metre board, second gear there, and not according you can get on the throttle early, as always you'll understeer wide onto the grass. Under the bridge he goes, flat out through turn 12. Now immediately onto the brakes, slight dab, get the weight forward, and then onto the brakes again through turn 13, the setup 14. And that is a wonderful lap there from Julian Jones. What's it going to be worth in terms of the timing tower? Well, we'll see as he crosses that timing line at 110 miles an hour. It's worth 6th place there at 54.671. Well, it's 1.1 seconds off the overall provisional pole time, but still, that was a very smooth lap there for Jones. Credit where it's due to the IT West driver. As he decides to park up, thinking that he probably can't do any more out there. Well, Blake Phillips, meanwhile, moves ahead of Jason Lynn in the AM and overall standings with 54.732. The gap between those two is just shy of a tenth, but Shahi Zahir is 2 tenths faster than the pair of them. So right now, the AM Championship leader, who's currently in the pit lane being serviced, is looking incredibly quick, and can anybody try to put a stop to him? As meanwhile, the only driver yet to get a lap on the board, this is a surprise, we normally expect it to be one of the first out there to get a lap on the board, is none other than Jermaine Warren as he comes down in towards turn number 11. Something's gone wrong in qualifying, and the 213 driver here just taking it easy. I wonder whether this circuit is proving to be a little bit of what is a bogey circuit from it. It's not an easy circuit, Motegi. It's arguably the hardest out there if you're not used to its nature, and well, Jermaine Warren there escorting himself wide out of turn 14. That's power understeer there as he makes way across that timeline, but with that is going to invalidate his lap, and he will not get a valid lap on the board. So for Jermaine Warren, it is going to be a start from last place. Of our 13 drivers, he will be the very last to make his way on to that grid. But then again, Mistakes can be very quickly made here, particularly on cold tyres and cold brakes, so he may fancy his chances, even if he has not been able to put a representative timing in qualifying, because the clock continues to count down, and at the 10 minutes when it's over, we immediately make our way to the grid for our one and only race. And that is qualifying complete, ladies and gents, when it is going to be best on overall pole, and Zuhair takes pole in 5th place, subject to those laps being validated. But here we go. So all drivers make the way onto the grid, and this is how they'll line up for round number 7 of the Middle of the Pack Racing League Fall Into Porsche Cup Championship for 2025, as brought to you on iRacing. Matt Best, your championship leader in Pro, starts off his day on a very positive note by taking overall and Pro pole position for Texas Speed Sim Racing. He is joined on the front row of the grid by Jaden Callaway for IHD West. The gap between the two of them, only half a tenth there, an incredibly close gap, but in the end it does go the way of Callaway. James Logsdon begins the day in 3rd for Bear Pope Zero, and he was a whole half a second behind by comparison, and that goes to show you just how impressive the laps were from your top 2. However, he will have the company of David Adeyee, who was only half a tenth behind him, if that, started full for ITD West Senior Vice President. Shahi Zuhair, he makes it another pole position, 5th on the grid today, the Sri Lankan driver for ITD West Senior Vice Presidents, behind his teammate, but ahead of the sister team driver of Julian Jones, who starts 6th for ITD West Interns Pro Esports Division. 7th starts on the full Friday grid. It's going to be Blake Phillips of the Pit Club Sim Racing, ahead of debutant in the AM class, Jason Lynn, and then we will see from the glass and steel photography and designs driver what will be Mark Senegal starting in 9th place Sunday GT Turtles, ahead of Glenn Bratton, who rounds off your top 10. Outside the top 10, not to be forgotten about, we have Tom Bryce, ITC West Interns Pro Esports Division, head of Caboose Crew's Cole Peterson, and last but not least on this grid, it is going to be Jermaine Warren, starting at 13th of our 13 drives with no valid lap. Well, with that, ladies and gents, when the grid is set, the lights are going on, and all drives in position. Here we go then, once more, the revs rise at our Porsche Cup cars for the 7th time this season, and it's light down, away we go here at Motegi, as it's a good start there from Matt Best. Absolutely bolts away right at the start, as they make the way towards turn number 1, and indeed, Callaway having a relatively slow start by comparison, and everybody else really trying to get out of first gear. But David Adeyee does move into 3rd, ahead of Logsdon, who's had the slowest start of them all. Julian Jones is right there with him, as in the rear of the pitch, you can see a bit of battling going on between Warren and Peterson, but into the braking zone they come, and Jones right now having to deal with Blake Phillips, who's leapt his way into the AM lead. Brilliant start there from the 225 driver, as Jones takes some yard trimmings with him, and that's going to be Zuhair up the inside immediately as the two teammates there decide to swap places. But coming down towards turn number 5 now, will we see Jones look for the return? He thinks about it, but decides it's not worth it, as meanwhile his teammate goes defensive. Mark Senegal versus Jason Lynn. Lynn up the inside. Good move there from Lynn. Takes the place. Up into 3rd again in the AM class. He's taking back the place he lost right at the start. But all these drivers right now, whilst they roar the way around, it's definitely been a smart start from many a driver. But Mark Senegal, I think, is very eager to show a bit of intellect here, how he can make a potential move. Jermaine Warren up the inside there of Carl Peterson, who left the door wide open. I wonder if he'd made a small mistake. As meanwhile, we briefly lost Jason in from the running field, but he has now been restored to the running order there. A slight technical glitch while timing tower. Through turn number 9 they come, and Warren and Peterson together. Oh, goodness me, something's going very wrong right in front of them. Oh, the field here. This is mostly AM drivers all steps on each other's toes. Glenn Bratton's in amongst that, but it is Jason Lynn who defends in the middle of the road here. They look to go 3 wide towards the apex, and in the end, Jermaine Warren decides it's not worth it as Tom Bryce watches on. But right now we see Bratton and Senegal going side by side here. The battle of the privateer versus what is the Sunday GT Turtles driver, and what's quite telling is that Senegal's got some rear bodywork damaged out on his Porsche Cup car, the 227, so I think he's either been knocked on the back or he's been sent around as part of some contact, and the whole field bunched up there out of respect. And as they all came down for turn number 11, no change. It would seem Mark Senegal holding Bratton at bay. But after 1 lap and plenty more of them to come over the 35 minutes race distance, Matt Best continues to lead. 6.5 tenths to Jaden Callaway. David Adeyee, meanwhile, started 4th in 3rd, ahead of James Logsdon, who's half a second behind. Blake Phillips, your AM leader, he's trying to pull away on a tear, but he's got Shahi Zuhair only 8 tenths behind him, with Julian Jones then in 7th place, and Jason Lynn then earmarks the second half of the field, currently 4 seconds behind, and he brings everybody else, Senegal, Bratton, Warren, Bryce and Peterson with him. All 13-year starters are still running and looking good out there at the moment, as we come back to Adeyee versus Logsdon. And in fact, you can see Logsdon now, well, however slowly he started the opening lap, he's now starting to build up some momentum, and he is looking quicker for it as they make the way down through turn number 5. The only problem is that Logsdon right now can get close, but can he find a way to get through? It's It's not easy, and I think the fact that he's still trying to get those tyres and the brakes warmed up slightly is the biggest contributing factor here. Now remember, of course, over the 35 minutes of racing, there are no mandatory pit stop requirements, but we are expecting the fuel tank restrictions to force a pit stop or a major consideration of a no-stop strategy. We've seen pit stops in every sprint race so far this season, even at Okayama, where the wet conditions meant they could go a bit longer. They all did need to pit before the final 5 minutes, otherwise the fuel tank would have run dry. And they're in brilliant sunshine today and plenty of acceleration zones as well. We are expecting there to be one pit stop for fuel, and Logsdon therefore might be playing the gambit here, which is, does he just simply stay behind and try to fuel save a little bit and protect the tyres as well? Because there'll be no tyre change in the pit lane. They'll be finishing the race on the tyres they start on, so a bit of tyre protection work right now is going to be highly beneficial the deeper they go into the race distance, given these tyres under full attack can only last about 15 minutes at most. They've got to make them go double that distance as a minimum. But whilst these two continue to fight each other, Mark Senegal fighting here with Jermaine Warren. He's had a big fall down the order, has Mark, quite recently. We're going to get a replay of that very shortly to try and explain what's happened. And I think we've got some replays coming up of a number of moments in the very start of the race. But back to Addy versus Logsdon we go. And Logsdon looking up the inside here into turn one. It goes all in. Addy did not want to give him the space there. You can see he crept over as much as he could without making contact there. But Logsdon will take the place. Nice move there for the Bear Pope Zero driver. That puts him all the way up into third place now, and he's 2 seconds away from Jaden Callaway and Matt Best as they fight up the front, albeit Best and Callaway I think are exchanging sector times at the moment. It's not going out of style anytime soon. Goodness me, the amount of gravel on the outside there of turn number 4, you'd think the wind is casting it all over the road, as meanwhile that's a big error there for the Shah. He's ahead, going very sideways out of turn number 4, locks up the front left brake to settle the car down, but he loses a place there to Julian Jones, the AM leader, making a small mistake. He doesn't normally make mistakes, and well, that's the first mistake we've caught on camera in the best part of 4 rounds. But make no mistake here, as we come back down the field, Cole Peterson looking up the inside of Warren. Trying to go for the move there, but Jermaine Warren in the middle of the pack privateer machine. He holds position. Mark Senegal also trying to go round the outside of Peterson. The Caboose crew driver here under a lot of pressure. How he's going to withstand it for a brief moment. Senegal there thinks he's got the space and the right to drive up the inside into turn 7. And in the end, he's earned the right as he gets himself fully alongside. And Carl Peterson does not have a response other than to let it go. So great work there from Warren and Senegal to pass Peterson. And we look forward to seeing whether Carl Peterson can try and come back at them a little bit later on in the race distance. But with that, we need to take a look back at some of the moments from the start of the race. And here we go, ladies and gentlemen, as we take a trip back in time. So this was back to the very start of the race, and as the lights went on here, watch Matt Best on the right compared to everybody else. The pole sitter there, you'll see he absolutely bolts away right at the start. Everybody else seems to struggle off the line, even Jaden Callaway, who tucks in behind. But as they all made their way into turn number 1, for the most part, everyone was relatively sedate. Blake Phillips had a monster start as well, and he managed to leap his way up the order. Can we get the on board from Blake Phillips, I wonder? The answer is yes, we can. So this was Blake Phillips' start, and let's listen in. Well, initially dropped it slightly in first gear, but then very quickly re-engaged the throttle, and from there, the start was absolutely phenomenal from Blake Phillips, and when he was able to make his way past Shahi's ahead, he left him for dead on the start-finish line, and we'll try to go around the outside there, Julian Jones, but it was to no avail, but a brilliant start for him, no doubt about it. Now, we had this for Glenn Bratton only moments later, and lap number 2, this was Bratton, I think, getting it slightly wrong, and the whole field cascading in behind him. Went very deep there. That was through turn number 4. Oh, goodness me, Jermaine Warren, meanwhile, getting it very wrong coming out of the corner, so Warren went round as well, and both drivers there making some slender mistakes. Easy to make, no doubt about it. And well, from that, we then had this for Mark Senegal on the latter half of lap number 2. This was coming down in towards turn number 10, as Jason Lynn there was having some technical difficulties, and Senegal carried a bit too much speed, and the rear of the car let go. Already damaged on the rear. That was the concertina we didn't quite catch on the replay cameras, and well, Mark Senegal getting it wrong there, and having to now pick up the pieces and get racing it once again. But with that, let's go back to your live racing action, ladies and gentlemen, because there's plenty more to come. And as we come on back, well, back to your leader first and foremost as time continues to trickle away. And what we can see here is that right now Matt Best is still holding on, albeit the gap 3 tenths on average to Jaden Callaway, and well, 7 minutes has passed and we've got plenty more time in the tank. That is approximately what is 1/5 of the race gone, but right now Best is not having any opportunity to grab himself a respite, as if anything Callaway seems to be starting to build up a bit of momentum. This is Okiyama all over again, albeit we're missing both Logsdon and Adeyemi from being on the lead pack. They have fallen behind. You can see, Logsdon there in third place, and David Adeyemi a little bit further behind in the rear of the picture. But your top two right now are definitely pushing each other and keeping each other honest, as meanwhile Mark Senegal is into the pit lane. I suspect that might be for repair work on the Sunday GT Turtles car after the contact he had to the rear of the car at turn number 9 at the start of the race. Well, as a result, I think that's upset the suspension and aero balance of the car, and he doesn't quite feel comfortable with it anymore. And it was a nasty knock on the rear out of turn number 9 on the opening lap, which we saw the tail end of. We didn't quite see the start of it, but I suspect it may have been Glenn Bratton, or a driver around Glenn Bratton, getting it wrong, and it did cause the entire AM pack outside of the top two to sandwich up together quite nicely, albeit not for the contacts for those involved. But as Best and Callaway continue to do battle here, the only problem that Jaden Callaway does have here, of course, is the fact that he's running in dirty air constantly. Now, on these short straights and the longer straights, it's absolutely brilliant. He will gain time, particularly when everybody is running the fixed setups, so everybody has the same amount of rear wing and therefore the same aerodynamic profile to the car. The problem is, though, when you're going through these medium speed corners in particular, the sweeping S's sequence, you lose natural race time because you don't have as much downforce in the car as forced by the dirty air, and therefore you have to sacrifice a little bit of speed into the corners. Now, it offsets via the straights, but the problem is if you don't get it right, if you don't anticipate the effects of that dirty air time and time again, you're more and more prone to make mistakes, or you start to overheat those front tyres because you have to use them a bit more aggressively. And that's what Callaway, I think, right now is having to find the measure of as he runs a bit wide out of turn 14. And doesn't really gain or lose any time from it, is how close does he get? Because the closer he gets, the bigger the slipstream effect, but the closer he gets, the bigger the dirty air effect. So therefore, it really gives and takes in equal measure as James Logsdon starts setting purple sectors around the lap. He hasn't quite set the fastest lap of the race yet, but he's not too far off of it. Jaden Callaway currently holds on to it at 53.53. However, Logsdon is 3 tenths behind, but he is going purple in some sectors, and I think his confidence is growing as he's starting to drop Adeyemi more and more. Blake Phillips, your AM leader, here he is in 5th place. He has started to pull away from Julian Jones, intriguingly. He's put 1.5 seconds between himself and Jones, and you can see Shahi Zahair in the rear of the picture, with the door banners and the wind mirrors being in orange rather than blue, which denotes an AM driver rather than a pro driver. And well, that's how you can see the gap between Zahair and Phillips is gradually opening up, with the IT West machine of Julian Jones, Zahair's teammate, between the two of them, and not really gaining, not really losing either. Well, it's just little by little that Phillips is extending that gap. From there, we come back to your highest placed pro driver at the moment, Tom Bryce, as he runs in 12th place, chasing down Kyle Peterson. And I believe there was a bit of an off track for Tom Bryce on lap number 4, and that's what's led to him falling back into 12th place. We may get a replay of that in due course, but right now his game plan is to try and get back on track in terms of his race. That's going to be a lot easier said than done here as he goes after Peterson, because he'll find the wall of dirty air, confronts him very quickly. But as he does, well, Mark Senegal, the driver who came into the pit, it does look as though the repair of his Porsche has been fully repaired, so that's the fast repair used, and the car's a lot happier now, and I wonder whether he was able to time it right, so therefore he's been able to take all the fuel he's needed. He did spend the best part of 7 seconds stationary in the pits, so therefore that would indicate that fuel has gone into the car, because the fast repair would normally dictate it's only a 3 to 4 second stationary stop. So I think the team have tried at Sunday GT Turtles to get him enough fuel in the car to get to the end, but he might have to do quite a bit of fuel saving, given the fact he pitted so early, only at the end of lap number 5. But from the very back of the field back to the very front of the field, we look to Best versus Callaway, and we ride on board looking back from the rear of the Texas Speed Sim Racing leader. So onto the brakes he comes, and as he does, well, Jaden Callaway there, the body language of the number 37 behind is really telling there. You can see, look how early he turns in there for turn 4. That is to offset the dirty air as he picks up a little bit of apex oversteer there, trying to get the power down. But the point is that Callaway right now is really feeling as though there's a golden opportunity here to try and take the lead. Well, the way he's approaching these corners, he's really pushing the car towards the apex. Best, meanwhile, trying to take it a little bit calmly here. I think Best is learning from what happened at Okiyama, which was he was put under so much pressure in the early stage of the race from Callaway, from Adeyemi, and from Logsdon, that in the end he was really made to drive the race to their rhythm. And now what he's trying to do here at a circuit where it's a bit easier to be the defender and be able to hold the natural racing line, what he's trying to do here is essentially put Callaway in the position which is, if he's going to go for the move, presuming Best doesn't make a mistake, which is the whole aim of his racecraft at this point, Best is going to, well, Best will just hold his line and Callaway will need to absolutely look for a diving point. But then there comes the natural thing, which is if you go for a dive, if you go from too far back, it relies on the car in front essentially being able to give you the space, being aware that you're coming. But Best there defending down towards turn 11, brings himself back across the road. Callaway immediately put himself back on the racing line, and I think Callaway's clocked onto the fact that all his tricks and his aggression is now being understood, and Best in turn is realising what is coming his way, and therefore he doesn't want Okayama to repeat once again, where he's stolen off the lead right at the end, albeit fairly so. There's no such thing as a steward's inquiry there. Indeed, it was a very clean race between all the drivers, but Best right now doesn't want to fall foul of not winning for a second round in a row. As they come in towards another lap, well, you can see there Callaway so close. That lovely camera angle there really gives you a sense of perspective of what 2.5 tenths looks like under the concertina effect in turns 1 and 2. And well, right now Callaway so quick for these opening hairpins, but Best is just able to get the power down perfectly, and that's what keeps him nice and safe. As James Logsdon, and 2.5 seconds back, he's not really losing on the leaders, but he's not really gaining either. And I think he's a little bit at the mercy here of what happens up front. The only alternative theory, and I wonder if Bear Pope have been talking to him about this from the pit wall, is whether he saves some fuel now and doesn't aim to close up. Now, that may sound a little bit odd, but think of it this way. Fuel saving, you can sometimes gain the best part of 3 to 4 seconds in the pit lane, and that can enable you to essentially leap ahead of your rivals. And the fact that he's only 2.5 seconds back off the leaders, if they fight each other, they won't gain any time on him, and he can use that to fuel save essentially to fill in the time he would gain. He loses the gain time to save the fuel that will gain him time in the pits. And well, right now Logsdon's the only one who'll know what he's doing at the time, but he's definitely making sure to stay within touching distance, but not too close as to fill the dirty air and risk overheating those front tyres and brakes. So I think there might be a bit more here than meets the eye with the Bear Pope team. I think they might be onto something. Blake Phillips, meanwhile, well, he was leading in the AM class quite comfortably as he upbrakes himself a little bit there to the apex of turn number 10. Just goes slightly deep, although it's a minuscule loss of time. It's probably about what would be 1 or 2 hundredths there. But one thing that is noticeable is the gap he had to Jones and Zahair has been reeled back in. It's now down to 6 tenths. Zahair, you can see here at the back of the trio, he's only 1 second away from Phillips. Although he's got the problem of trying to find a way past teammate Julian Jones here. And well, Jones understands he wants to get through to pick up his own points in the Pro Championship. But right now Zuhair wants to get on through to chase down the AM leader and with it make it a 6th win of the season and really give himself the best possible opportunity going into the season finale at Phillip Island. So therefore the team will need to decide what they decide to do. And I suspect they'll simply say, well, you guys are welcome to race each other, just don't take each other out of the race. That's the #1 rule as teammates. Well, we look forward to seeing plenty of racing between them if the story is so. But as they continue the way onwards, well, right now, all these drivers still close together for the time being. Well, no movement, at least for now, as we look a little bit back to Tom Bryce here, who has made some progress, found his way past Carl Peterson on a previous lap, as Peterson passed him as well, and we take a quick look back at how he got the move done. And here we go, ladies and gentlemen, this was for 11th place. So this was down towards turn number 1, a classic move under braking here, and Bryce all in, and Peterson in the end gave him the racing room, tried to hang it around the outside, which is an approach, albeit not, you go for a cutback into turn number 2, and well, Peterson tried to get the power down, but Bryce in the end made it look like clockwork. But Peterson, notably, there didn't use too much time. He actually was very smart with his throttle inputs, was Peterson, and I think if he had been a bit more confident with it, he could have perhaps tried to take the place back, but I suspect his motive was just simply stay behind the ITD West driver and try to move forward. And with that, we move forward and back to your racing. So thank you to Arturo Mayoga, as always, for those post-round replays, thanks to the wonderful technology developed by the man. And well, meanwhile, as we come back to what's ongoing at the very front of the field, Still more time. We're only heading towards the halfway point of the race now. And what we can see here is that Best and Callaway, they're close again, but it does seem as though that gap has slightly opened up a little bit. And I wonder if Callaway here is now starting to feel the pinch of a little bit of excess heat in those front tyres, albeit I don't think he wants to reveal his hand as we ride on board with the 37. But understandably, there is going to become a threshold at which point he will be pushing just a little bit too hard. He will need to back off, alternatively he will risk losing tyre life at the end of the race distance. But through turn 3 and into 4 they go. And well, there is a story on the back of that car in front with regards to what states on the rear bumper. We'll come back to that story in due course, as Callaway there having a little bit of snap oversteer on power at turn number 4. And that's what we mean about tyre life. As he tries to get the power down, tries to be a bit more aggressive, the tyre's not necessarily gripping up the way he wants, and perhaps a little bit too eager with the loud pedal. Meanwhile, off camera, Jermaine Warren is into the pit lane for his one and only stop. He's decided to split the race into 2 equal halves. There might be something to be said about that, as he'll come out in 12th place, in a very lonely 12th place, but have plenty of clear track with which to try and deliver some laps. But as we do see Best now open up the gap to 6 tenths, that small wobble coming out of turn number 4 has created an extra 3 tenths in the margins between these two drivers. On as they go towards turn number 10, and then we come back to Blake Phillips, Julian Jones and Shahi Zahair. They're getting very close to each other now as we say hello to Pink Sena Gamer in the YouTube chat, and hope you're doing well, madam. And well, as all the tries come through, well, right now we do see what is there, Phillips, Jones and Zahair all together. Jones there showing his first signs of wanting to make a move, but in the end it's really just posturing, it's nothing more than that. But there could be some value here in potentially one of the two ITD West drivers opting to go for a pit stop, as Phillips puts himself in the middle of the road there to break the toe down the long back stretch. So Phillips is definitely feeling a bit of pressure. That's his first sign that he's a little bit worried about what's to come, and Zahair right now is getting closer and closer here and putting pressure on Jones. But as they head up the hill in towards turn number 13 and 14, well, they all decide to stay out again, but I wonder if one driver is missing a trick here in terms of the potency of the undercut strategy. As hold up a second, Jaden Callaway's had a big error coming through turn number 1, and with that, Matt Best has opened up the gap to 2.6 seconds. Suddenly, Callaway's had a slide, and James Logsdon is right behind him now. He's caught up very quickly, and at the same time, we have had an incident for Carl Peterson, who's fallen off the circuit, albeit has not lost any places. So let's see if we can get a quick replay to explain what exactly happened to Callaway, because it is of some significance here, as Logsdon now is only half a second back and closing quickly. So this was firstly what happened to Carl Peterson as he had an off track. This was at, I believe, turn number 3. Just went a bit deep there, outbroke himself into the corner. But meanwhile, we come back to what happened to Jaden Callaway. This was Callaway then in towards what was the corner. In fact, this was a bit earlier on where he did try and chase down Best, but it didn't quite work out early. So therefore, we have come into this, and unfortunately, we haven't got the event replay exactly available. So we do apologise for that, but what we can tell you is it was a bit of a slide. And let's go back to your live racing instead, ladies and gentlemen. As we come back to all the racing right now, Callaway and Logsdon, they are 8.5 tenths between each other, so therefore the gap has opened up a little bit more. Callaway definitely the faster of the two drivers. However, I think with the speed he's trying to deliver, he's now finding the limits of grip in the number 37, and Best is in control. Still not in control here in 5th place. It's in the balance between Phillips, Jones and Zahair, as David Adayi is 4.5 seconds up the road from this. Your top 4 has definitely walked away. Down through 11. Phillips right now, all he's got to keep doing is pumping in these laps, and I think he's going to feel quite safe. Albeit if he really wanted to turn the screw here, the other thing he could do is call out the bluff of the two ITD West drivers behind us. Zahair there was very aggressive into the apex of turn 14. A very tight line. I think that was an error there from Zahair. I don't think that was him trying to look for a move on Jones. What it has done is forced Jones to hurry up behind Phillips. So in fact, it has been a little bit of a wake-up call there for Julian Jones. But Zahair, I think, outbroke himself into 13. And right now, Phillips goes very wide at turn number 2. Jones is not quite ready to try to attack here. So Blake Phillips is going to be given an extra life. Indeed, as a cat, he's using up all his 9 lives. Looking up the inside is Jones, but he's too far back as they come down in towards turns 3 and 4. But great racing form in between these three right now. Blake Phillips, well, he knows he needs this and win today, and ideally he needs to finish as high as possible in order to guarantee he's going to get some significant points over Zahair. And right now he would gain the best part of what would be what will be 5 points over his rival, as Jones there getting so close, almost tapping the rear of Phillips' car, and had to back off there, but had to slide loose as a result of it. Into the pit lane off camera has come Carl Peterson for his mandatory stop. And well, Phillips right now holding on this 12th lap, but the pressure is building here. And indeed, right now, if it was a kettle, you can imagine it's heading towards boiling point, but will it boil over, or will he be able to fizzle out the steam? The 225 driver, he is not one to succumb to the pressure normally, and right now he's doing an incredible job to hold on. But Zahair has got all the cards in his favour behind. He can fuel save, he can time manage, and he can choose when to pit. But Phillips does need to think about here, is it worth just staying out there? Because if Zahair comes in, well, he may just be able to get the jump. The only reason I think that he or Jones have not come in so far is because of the fact they are worried that coming in means they will find some traffic elsewhere on the circuit when they emerge, and Phillips will be, by going long, be able to just stay ahead of them in relative strategy terms. But it's the gamble you have to play here, and you can see there Jones looking very quick out of 11, thinks about the inside into 12, and Blake Phillips in the end will just hold his line, puts the pressure on the man behind to have to think about the move or think about diving to the inside, and calls in either an instant or what is an overtaken opportunity at the century. That's another lap down. More to come. 12 minutes left on the clock here. The fight is absolutely heading towards a crescendo. Jones again looks up the inside. Not quite able to get it done. But right now, Julian Jones, he is throwing everything at this. Phillips has a poor run out of turn number 2. We're on board with Julian Jones here, and he knows he's got the bit between his teeth. He's going to look up the inside. Phillips puts himself in the middle of the road, says to Jones, if you want it, you have to work for it. And in the end, Jones says, don't mind if I do. Goes up the inside. Phillips looks at the cutback here as they go into turn number 4. And as they squeeze their way together, Jones has the back on the throttle there. He can't turn in, and therefore Phillips gets back ahead. Brilliant work from Blake Phillips here. Very smart counter-attack. And as they come down towards 5, Jones is still there on the inside. Back onto the brakes he goes. Can Phillips pull off another switch back here? No, he can't. And Julian Jones finally takes the 5th place over his rival, as meanwhile Phillips is right behind him here, heading up towards turn number 7. Now we look up the inside into the S's. He does, and he stays glued to the back. I think that's a mistake there. As much as he does want to stay with him, I think if he wanted the place back, he needed to go for the move right there and then and go for a dive. Although I think Phillips has one more and more important thing in his mind, and that is keeping Shahi Zahair at bay. Keep in mind, of course, that Zahair does have the opportunity, or has had the opportunity for the last 25 minutes to save plenty of fuel with his car. And I think Phillips right now may be figuring out that being the leader of this group has come at a bigger cost than previously realised. But we will see when they do their pit stops. But then again, right now he can afford to start to back off a little bit, but he'll need to stay with Jones in order to save some fuel of his own, as Ahead just continues to watch and proves to sit there menacingly. But what a brilliant battle between these right now. All 3 superstars. And, well, Phillips is absolutely having to keep it all together all the way to the very end of this opening stint as they all head onwards. And Phillips immediately responds here. So that was his game plan. Stay ahead until you lose one of the places and then release it. I think it's a fair plan. But now, how does Zahair respond? He stayed out, of course, but does he put in a purple lap here in his own race in terms of his class? Well, he won't be able to put one in overall, surely, but right now, pressure is on Shahi Zahair. He needs to deliver a very good lap and not make a mistake, and if so, he may be able to come out ahead of Blake Phillips based on strategy. Jason Lynn, he moves up to 2nd in amps, 7th overall, but keep in mind he was 8 seconds behind, and therefore the theory would be he will re-emerge what will be 8 seconds or so behind when all the strategy plays out, because he's yet to take a pit stop, as Phillips, meanwhile, with a relatively quick stop, 7 seconds stationary. The Pickup Sim Racing team have done a fantastic job there, and right now he's ahead of Glenn Bratton. That's important, and that's some important data, which I get the feeling that IT West will be analysing here, and they'll be likely saying to Jones and Zahair, we want you in at the end of the next couple of laps, because there is space for you to come out ahead of any traffic, and therefore if Phillips is safe, you've got to respond immediately now. Meanwhile, at the very front of the field, it's best at Callaway and Logsdon, still separated by only 3.5 seconds between all 3, as we do see Callaway and Logsdon gradually gap at each other little by little. And what's noticeable here is the fact that whilst Callaway was able to initially pull away from Logsdon, as soon as that gap has gone upwards of about 1.2 seconds, Logsdon is now matching Callaway. I wonder whether Logsdon's just struggling in the dirty air of another car around here. Indeed, this Motegi circuit, not easy as he makes a mistake of his own there. Goes very deep into turn number 11, goes to the gravel, and as Logsdon returns, well, that I think is going to really settle what will be the fight for 2nd, as Best and Callaway are in. Logsdon stays out for another lap here, so he can go longer. Meanwhile, going on as well, Tom Bryce and Mark Senegal fight each other. They were fighting a little bit earlier on before we saw Logsdon go off the road. They continue to fight as James Logsdon now goes into the lead of the race on circuit, but not on strategy. Addy stays out as well, so he's going to go another lap. I believe Julian Jones is also staying out there. So a few surprises with regards to drivers going very long in this race. But best Callaway and Zahair all together as we do come back to the end of the pit lane. And in fact, look at how much Jaden Callaway has gained in the pit stops. He has gained 2 seconds in all, but in the end, Best is still ahead, and Best will be very grateful that he was able to hold on to a lead, and Callaway's mistake has cost him the lead of the race. If Callaway had not had that slide coming out of turn number 2 only 7 laps ago, he would be right there, and he would be ahead of Best if you do the theory in terms of the gap exchanges in the pit lane, because Callaway has just gained 3 seconds in the pit stops. It's not enough. And Best, as a result, is now your effective leader, subject to where all of our top 3 come out with regards to pit stops. But we do expect that they will come out behind based on the relative pit times. But as we look to Jermaine Warren, he's jumped ahead of Glenn Bratton in the pits. In fact, brilliant work there for the 2-1-3 team as Bratton re-emerges down in 4th place. So Jermaine Warren's used strategy to move into the podium positions. Jason Lynn's in the pits as well, and the car is still there. I think the team have made an error. Have they changed the tyres on it, or have they found something that's wrong with the car? Something's broken there, the team, and as they make the way up to speed, well, Jason Lynn in the end, we do wonder, I wonder if they've put tyres on that car instead of just simply putting the fuel in, whether there's a bit of a mistake on the strategy call. But Jason Lynn drops all the way down to 12th place. And suddenly what was looking to be a potential podium on his debut in the AM class has been completely taken away from him. And Jermaine Warren, after leaping Glenn Bratton, is now your final podium contender in the AM class. Logsdon's into the pit lane, and as he comes on in, David Addy stays out. So Addy, once again, much like Okiyama, deciding to go as much distance as possible before he makes his way into the pit. I think he decides the strategy is the overcut is the best cut of it. Julian Jones has also come into the pits. But as we do have full pit stop season in flow, well, Logsdon parks up. Julian Jones gradually comes to a halt very shortly. And well, there goes Best. There goes Callaway at the bottom of your screen. And that is your de facto race leader as he makes his way on around. But where does Logsdon come back out? He comes back out 5 seconds behind. So Logsdon has in fact lost quite a bit of time. That would have been because of his mistake going into the gravel trap at turn number 11. And well, that's been added to with a further second in the pit lane. Julian Jones is 11 seconds behind. So the only question mark is now, where does David Addy come out strategy-wise? Because he is still out there, yet to take a pit stop, but he is still impressing at the very front as the ITT West driver, as Blake Phillips and Shahi Zahair, they are as they were. So Zahair was not able to get the jump ahead of Phillips in the pits. Phillips was able to hold on. However, it should be pointed out that the Le Pit Club Sim Racing driver had a much shorter stop than Zahair, so therefore one would wonder whether the team have intentionally underfueled the car in order to give him track position, and therefore he might have to do a little bit of fuel saving in order to be able to get to the end here. But he'll have to do that fuel saving whilst defending. Now that sounds a bit difficult. That sounds as though he's having to multitask, and the answer is yes, he would have to. However, bear with us, because one of the things he can do is essentially, in a lot of these lower speed apexes, he can delay his throttle response. Essentially, what he can try to do is delay the time in which he returns the throttle. He can delay it just a little bit. That will help him creep beyond the corner, carry a bit less speed out of the corner. But the idea is that Zahair will bunch up behind him and have to back off himself, and then Phillips can get back on the throttle. Another thing he can also do is just simply lift and coast in some of these braking zones when he does have half a second gap or so, and Zahair's not close enough to see that Phillips is essentially lifting and coasting, and therefore he hasn't got the ability to make a split-second decision whether to dive up the inside or not. So that's what Phillips is working on right now. He's very good at defensive driving. We've seen that all day today, and Zahair needs to really get into 2 to 3 attempts on average if he wants to take away Phillips' ability, if he needs to fuel save, to be able to do so comfortably, as that's a mistake from Phillips there. Goes very deep at turn number 11. Zahair looking around the outside, but he runs out of road, and Phillips holds his ground just for a little bit longer, but Zahair is throwing everything at this as we ride on board with the 209 Sri Lankan driver and the ITC West Senior Vice President's car right now. It wants a 6th win of the season. It doesn't want the Pit Club Sim Racing to add a second one to their tally. He wants to give himself the best possible advantage going to Phillip Island, but right now it's going to be the unstoppable force meets the immovable object. Who is going to win? Well, we have got 3.5 minutes and a final lap to decipher, ladies and gentlemen. And right now, Zahare's with 3/10, so he can now really start to turn the screw as he gets so close under braking there into turn 3. Phillips with a very different line, but slides through turn number 4, slides again. Phillips is struggling for grip. Here comes Zahare then, as Phillips goes defensive to the inside and stays with him all the way through. And as they come down into the braking zone, well, Phillips in the end just holds his ground. Zahare literally poking and probing left, right, and centre. Indeed, if you ever remember Operation when you were growing up as a kid, you can imagine he's the player right now trying to poke at all the bones in the patient's body, and right now seeing which one's going to cause a reaction. And Phillips is not sounding off the alarm just yet as he tries to hold his ground, but Zahare is looking so desperately so left, right, and centre fairly as well. It's such brilliant racing between these two, and they really have been the two big contenders of the AM Championship all season long. And this is definitely going to go to Phillip Island, but will Zahare go there comfortably, or will he go there knowing that his lead has been slightly slashed? Well, that's what Phillips is hoping for, but right now Zahare is throwing everything at this, and all the patience and prep work he put in on the opening stint is being rewarded with the fact he's got a car that's now very capable to attack, whereas Phillips meanwhile seems to be in the car that is struggling to stay on track. But coming down then towards the hairpin, and as they come down, well, meanwhile, we look back to the very front. There's Best, there's Callaway, your leaders over on in Pro. They go onto the penultimate lap of racing, and we will get 19 laps in, given the remaining time. And James Logston, well, despite Addy going the longest of everybody, he has not been able to bridge the gap back down. Addy has seen that gap stay static at 2 seconds, and therefore the fight for third falls silent, at least for now, but we will keep one eye on it where we can. Battles elsewhere, not really happening. It really is right now some long-distance battles between where's third and fourth. Best and Callaway are separated by a second here, and they are gradually coming together. Keep in mind, of course, Callaway does have the distant toe, but he also has the dirty air that comes with it. And then we do have your Amley battle for 6th place overall. We have top 5 being pro drivers, and then it's AMS all the way through, excluding Tom Bryce in a length, your other pro driver. Well, right now, Phillips just holding on as Zahare gets it very wrong there at turn number 3 on the exit, and that causes him to extend his exit out of turn number 4. So a big mistake there from Zahare. It's not going to come together quite nicely there. And right now, Blake Phillips just holding on for now as they go under the bridge, and through turn number 6 they come once again. That gap, it's opened up for now, but I wouldn't be surprised if it closes down quite quickly, and Zahare fancies his chances, but he's got to temper himself a little bit and think, I've made one small mistake. It's the only mistake I've really made this race other than the slow start. I can't afford another one, however, otherwise it will give Phillips so much comfort that he might just be able to walk away with this to the finish line. Up towards turn 10 they come, and well, Jones is 3 seconds ahead of them, so no worry from Phillips about any dirty air washing out the front end of the car. All he's got to worry about is nailing every corner from this point onwards. But at the front of the field, 30 seconds left on the clock, and with those 30 seconds we go on to a final lap here today at the Motegi circuit in Japan. Best still leading for now, weaves down the start finish straight, tries to break the toe, but all he does is actually extends his run towards the opening corner, and with that decreases straight line speed, albeit Callaway only really gains 200ths as a result of that. But Best right now, that goes to show you how much this means to the Texas Speed Sim racing driver, in the fact he doesn't want to give Callaway even a sniff of an advantage as they come down towards the next braking zone. But from them, we look to James Logston as he continues to keep ahead of David Addy, who's brought the gap down by half a second, but it's not enough to be in attacking distance. Here is Julian Jones. He's your 5th place runner with the Battle for the AM win right behind him there, albeit he's still got that 3-second gap, quite comfortable as he makes his way down. And then here are your 2 big heroes in the AM class, comfortably ahead of the rest of the AM field by the best part of 21.5 seconds, with Jermaine Warren, your 3rd place runner in the AM class, just setting a personal best there at 54.946. He's been very consistent today, having started all the way from the back of the field with no valid qualifying time, but I think in the end he's put it all together when it's mattered most. But right now, what matters most at the very front of the field is it's going to Best hold on for one final tour of the circuit, because Callaway was closing for a little moment, and then he's actually lost out a little bit. So I think Callaway might have just had a slide coming out of turn number 8. Into 10 they go, and you can see Best this time taking it very carefully to the apex there, I wonder if he's worried about a little bit of tyre wear on that rear left tyre. Perhaps it's starting to get a bit warm as Callaway there weaves behind. He's sending the signal, which is I don't think I can catch you. And Best right now has got to read into that, not too much, but he's got to take some confidence here that he may have just beaten ITD West because he makes his way under the bridge in towards turns 12 and 13. Well, what a race it has been. And as Jaden Callaway gives pursuit, he's huffed, he's puffed, but he's not been able to blow down the defences of Matt Best, who holds on the end to take victory and will become your provisional 2025 Middle of the Pack Racing League Fall Into Porsche Cup champion in the Pro class. Ahead of Callaway finishes second place. James Logston finishes in third for Bear Pope Zero, head of David Addy and Julian Jones. But what about Blake Phillips, as there's Jones heading towards the timeline for Phillips? Sure, he's a hair through everything at it, but Phillips will hold on and take his second AM win of the season and sixth place with it, which forces the AM Championship to go the distance all the way to Phillip Island, and it will be some time before we see your third place finisher in the AM class. But Shahi Zaharinian could not find a way through no matter what he threw at this. But what a brilliant drive there from Blake Phillips. And well, we have got a bit of drama occurring because Jermaine Warren has had a spin. He has dropped all the way back to Glen Bratton, but I think with 2 quarters to go, Warren will bring home another podium. It's been some time since he's been on the AM podium, but well done to him for Middle of the Pack Racing League. He will come home with a privateer in third place in class, 8th overall, ahead of Glen Bratton, and your top 10 will be completed by Mark Senegal, 5th in the AM class, and knowing today things just did not click together. Tom Bryce, he'll take 11th place in. A bit of a lonely race after a few early off-track incidents. And then we will have Jason Lynn, who after a frustratingly long pit stop where the team got it wrong in the pit lane, he'll be your last lead lap finisher in 12th place ahead of Carl Peterson, who finished a lap down. But, ladies and gentlemen, as all of our drivers cool things on down, well, what a race it has been. And let's take a look at those overall results subject to any stewards' inquiries. And as we can see, after a grand total of 35 minutes or 19 laps of racing here at the Mobility Resort Motegi circuit in Japan, round number 7 of the Middle of the Pack Racing League Fall Into Porsche Cup Championship for 2025 saw Matt Best take overall and pro victory in the end for Texas Speed Sim Racing by a second, if that, over ITC West Jaden Callaway. Callaway looked threatening in the early stage of the race and seemed to really keep Best under pressure, but in the end, by being behind Best so closely for so long, it does seem as though the time life went away and went the way of the Texas Speed Sim Racing driver, and with it, congratulations to Matt Best. He does become our provisional overall champion, but the cup, meanwhile, for the Middle of the Pack Cup will go to Phillip Island to be concluded. James Logston, third place of Bear Pope Zero, did not have the ability to stay with the top 2 today. However, he was able to stay ahead of David Adeyee on strategy and on track to round off the overall and pro podium. Behind the Bear Pope Zero drivers, IT West Senior Vice President David Adeyee, who just was not able to replicate his form from Okayama here today at Motegi. Julian Jones, 5th place there for IT West Interns Pro Esports Division, but what a race he had to deliver. In the early stages, had to fight his way hard in the opening stint past Blake Phillips. He finally got that done towards the end of the opening stint, at which point that pulled the trigger on the 6th place finisher, and Blake Phillips in the end prioritised the AM win over overall position. It means he doesn't go into the season finale with as many points in his hands, but he does close the gap a little bit for the Pit Club Sim Racing to IT West Senior Vice President Shahi Zahair, your AM Championship leader coming into this round, and still your Championship leader coming out of this round, but the Sri Lankan driver will be gutted not to have been able to find a way through, and instead had to settle for 7th or 2nd in AM. Jermaine Warren, in the end, despite a late spin, held on to 3rd place in AM and the 8th place overall. Well done to the privateer, just ahead of fellow privateer Glen Bratton, who finished 4th in class, 9th overall. And it was Mark Senegal there with a highly frustrating race. That seems to be a recurring theme of the season in the second half, where he's qualified very well, but it hasn't clicked together in the race. He finished in 10th place there for Sunday GT Turtles. Tom Bryce was best rest on length, IT West Interns Pro Esports Division, I should say. 7 seconds ahead of debutant Jason Lynn for Glass and Steel Photography and Design, who was looking on course for the AM podium on his debut until there's a pit stop error which caused the team to go a bit too long in the pits, and it was a lap down at the finish for Carl Peterson for Caboose Crew, who kept in it to win it all the way through. Indeed, a round of applause to him there. 13 starters, 13 finishers, 12 of which on the lead lap, ladies and gentlemen. An absolutely superb race to boot. But with that, the circuit falls silent, and with that, it is now time for us to wrap up. Thank you very much for watching, and if you have enjoyed today's show, and perhaps you're sat there right now wanting to know more about the Middle of the Pack Racing League community in terms of what they're all about and how you can be on the grid for a future season of racing as we look more and more towards 2026 with only a round still left to go in the Fall Into PCUP Championship for 2025. Well, for all that and more, we do recommend firstly that you join our official Discord. Invite link available on the screen, and let me assure you, ladies and gentlemen, you will not find a more friendly and welcoming community of sim racers than the Middle of the Pack Racing League, and whilst they are based on the North American continent, they are open to drivers from all around the globe, from Japan to the United Kingdom, you name it. They've had drivers in that region race as part of their series over the best part of an extensive 8-year history. Alternatively, if you're more of a social media person, you can of course follow the MPRL on Twitter at twitter.com/MOP Racing, where you can stay up to date with all the latest news and announcements. And with that, well, goodness me, we may have made one announcement today in regards to your provisional pro overall champion in the form of Matt Best, but we still got plenty more winners and champions to announce as our season finale, and it's coming up in only a week's time as we will see our drivers make the way to Australia for our concluding round of the season and the Middle of the Pack Cup at the Phillip Island Grand Prix circuit. Round number 8 will be broadcasted on Saturday the 29th of November 2025, so save the date in your diary and come back in a week's time as we will see who will be your runner-ups in the Pro Class overall and who will take the Pro Cup, and we will also see out of whether Shahi Zahair or Blake Phillips will wrap up the AM Championship in their favour and also take the cup with them if there's not a late resurgence from Mark Senegal. With all that and more, tune in next time, but until then, we have been the Middle of the Pack Racing League. I've been your host and commentator, Paul Walsh, also known as TX1 or Britain Spit, depending on what media you follow me on, and until next time, we have to stay safe, stay well, stay smiling, but most importantly, like our drivers, ladies and gentlemen, remember to stay on track. Good night.